The college football eruption that we've been alluding to, if you're watching the show, you didn't waste your time. Everything I've told you that's been coming since this time last year, and especially since December and through now, it happened. It really started to happen a couple of months ago, and it happened last week. And I'm not going to bore you with the details because if you care, you already know. We had a whole settlement in the antitrust case like we talked about would happen. And then we had an entire new structure that was agreed upon as part of that settlement that will include revenue sharing with players. Again, we telegraphed all this. This shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. We talked about this at length on the show. And so we got all that. All right, I've had a big attack of conscience over the past few days, because as you know, we didn't do a Sunday show, so I haven't spoken to you about this yet. Meemaw used to always tell me, Joshua, just because it's newsworthy doesn't mean it's interest-worthy. This is certainly newsworthy. The Thamels and Dellingers and Marcellos and etc., they've gone to town on those keyboards writing about this. And it's really big. They'll talk about this 50 years from now, if college athletics is still around in any form that resembles what it is now. They'll talk about this for a long time. I'm not saying it wasn't newsworthy. I just sit around and wonder how much you care about it. Because I know what you guys do and don't care about. And there's a lot of stuff that you don't care about that's very newsworthy. And then there's some stuff within what is newsworthy that piques your interest. I know that because I'm just like you guys. So a lot of this, frankly, I don't care about. I know it's newsworthy, but I don't care to talk about it. If I go and sit down with you at lunch and we're chopping it up over barbecue, we wouldn't be talking about this. We'd be talking about whether Oklahoma's offensive line is going to be any good this year. And we'd be talking maybe on this front about how or how not to be able to notice college football 5 years from now. Is it going to resemble what it's always resembled? Is it going to be the sport and the game I love? And I think the answer is yes there. But I do want to talk about the stuff I think you do care about. At least I care about it, and you and I are usually one and the same on this front. We had to get here. Through all the monotonous headlines and the talk of these terms, whether they be legal or financial, that you may or may not care about, we had to get here. Remember in January, after the season was over, Michigan wins the national title. I told you, hey, I just talked to a lot of people at the playoff, semifinal, national title game, and it's about to get rough for a little while. You remember I told you that. And I told you it's going to suck for a little while. And if you love this sport and you're more of a traditionalist, it's not going to be a fun time. But I love this sport, and I'm a traditionalist. And I told you at the time, and I'm going to tell you again now that we're kind of in the eye of the hurricane, it's got to happen. We got to get there. We got to get through this. We're probably going to have to go down a couple of more rungs before we can climb to the top of the ladder. And that was non-negotiable. Okay, so now we get to a period where we've got some of these lawsuits off the table, and we don't have to pay for it, so who cares about that, right? But the follow-up part of that is the settlement that comes in. And this is where you need to pay attention. If you're someone who doesn't like that NIL is run amok, and you know how rarely we use that term on the show, and you don't like how bastardized the entire process of recruiting has become, not that it wasn't slightly that always, but it's really a mess now. If you don't like the mercenary nature that players and coaches alike have taken, where there's really no loyalty to the logo on the chest or the logo on the helmet, it's just where can I find the next buck? If you're tired of a lot of that, and I know a lot of you are, because it's not the sport you love, it's not how it should be shaped. If you're tired of that, we had to go through this, is my point. So if you get into a world now where you share revenue with the players, I think some of you truly don't like that. I think many more of you don't care. And then I think there's a third portion of you out there that support it, and there's a fourth portion, and I think many of you fall into this camp, who think you don't like it, but you really don't care. You just don't know that you don't care. And that test comes in the fall. Do you still tune in every bit as much as you used to? Do you still care every bit as much as you used to? Do you still get that nervous energy on Saturday morning, even though you got a 7:30 kickoff? Do you still feel the same way on 4th and goal at the 2 with the game on the line as you used to? If the answers here are yes, then you don't care about this stuff as much as you may think you do. It doesn't bother you as much because you got the same old Saturday you've always had. So we had to get through all this to get there. With the whole revenue sharing thing, just understand this. A bunch of mechanisms have been set in motion now. But one of them is that you may finally have at your disposal as a conference the power to incentivize guys staying put. Right now, guys move freely because there's really no incentive for them to stay at South Carolina or for them to stay at Purdue. But if you know that there is escalation in your earnings, the more that you're on the same roster year over year, then that is voila, that's incentive. Well, you couldn't do that back in the day. You couldn't do that 15 minutes ago. Now, maybe through your revenue sharing, because the school gets to decide, and I wish the conferences would really support this notion that the school decides, we're going to pay you no matter what. If you're playing football here, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you a little bit more as a sophomore. We're going to pay you a lot more as a junior. You graduate from here, you've got a huge payday at the end of your career as a Colorado Buffalo, as a Washington Husky, etc. So I'd be a big supporter of that. I have always been. Couldn't have it until now. Also, think about how transparent things become and how much guarantee there is in knowing that, hey, if I go to USC, I'm guaranteed this amount. There's really not a whole lot of guesswork anymore. And if you've been tuned out of this, we're not talking small change here. We're talking about $20+ million per school per year at the top end of this sport to be handed out to the players on that roster. Title IX is going to be an issue here. I saw Bud Elliott say this the other day. I tend to think his sentiment is true on this. He said something along the lines of, Title IX, yeah, it's going to be a hurdle that has to be cleared, but I think Title IX may have been used as the boogeyman in the room to avoid a lot of this for a long time, but now that you can't avoid it anymore, I think he said, I believe most of these universities will figure out a way to navigate around Title IX to the extent that the big-time revenue generators end up garnering most of the revenue. I actually think he's right on that. And so I don't know how. I'm not paid to know how. But I don't think Title IX in the end is going to quite be the insurmountable, Everest of argument that it is appearing to be on the horizon. So we've got all that going, okay? So you may or may not care about that. But here's what I want you to care about. And I'm going to humbly ask that you care about this. I want to be very careful because I want to be respectful of some people in this space. But not everyone, and I know this is going to shock a lot of you, not everyone who's vocalizing their thoughts about college athletics right now really care about college athletics. I know, let it set in. That has always been the case to a certain extent. So if I were you, if I were listening to me talk right now, and let's say I've kind of been checking in, checking out. I'm checking in because I like the show, and I appreciate it if you like the show. And I want to see what he has to say about this now that all this is out in the open. Well, here's what I have to say about it. The mess isn't going away just because you have a settlement here. The mess isn't going away just because you have revenue sharing now. The mess isn't going away because you need to understand something. It'll never be enough for some people. No matter how many concessions you have, no matter how big the payday ends up being, no matter how many rights you have and how freely you can exercise those rights as a player, former student athlete, now just player, it'll never be enough for some people. And I'm going to tell you why. For a long time, a lot of people in the bureaucratic and administrative world of college athletics got rich off of a sport that they weren't playing. They were just generating income off of it. And that's true. And a lot of them weaponized it for their own personal gain, and that's true. And they weren't in it for the love of college football or college basketball. They were in it for the love of their own bank accounts, and they found a way to leverage kids 18 to 22-year-olds playing a sport for their own personal gain. All that's true. I don't like it. If one of the byproducts of this is more money goes to the players and less of it goes to folks who are just sitting over here collecting a paycheck for doing next to nothing, then that's good collateral damage. But as sure as I say that to you, friends, you need to understand something else. There are people whose business model depends on college football remaining a mess because they have painted themselves as the white knight that is here to fix it. And so even if steps have been taken to clean up college football or fix college athletics, they've got to have the mess, guys, or they're out of a job. You know the types I'm talking about. Some of them are legal types. Some of them are collective types, or at least present themselves as that. Some of them are players' rights advocates. And they're really actors that are in the room for the same reason that various college bureaucratic types were in the room 10 or 15 years ago. They're here because there's a lot of money to be made off of having a seat at this table. Not everyone fits that description. I fully believe there's some people out there doing phenomenal work on the front of players' rights, on the legal front, on the representative front, on the collective front. There are a lot of folks doing great work, and I want to be very respectful of that. I'm not broad brushing this. I'm mid brushing it, because there are other voices in the room. I think you know as well as I do, even if you've only been paying a cursory amount of attention to this, that seem to have it at the forefront of their mind to make sure dissent is always fostered, to make sure that the fire is always stoked. Why? Because they don't want settlement. Why? Because they don't really want to arrive at a conclusion. If they arrive at a conclusion, if they fix the mess, and they've been profiting off either the outright mess or the illusion of a mess, why would they ever want an end to the mess? If you'll notice, if you follow politics a lot, you'll notice there's a lot of overlap in the themes I'm talking about here in college athletics and in the world of politics and how you get elected. You get elected off of selling yourself as the candidate to fix the mess. Well, then you get in office, and why would you ever want to fix the mess? If the mess is fixed, why do they need me anymore? These two things aren't so dissimilar. College athletics at the highest level from a business and legal standpoint versus politics. Now, you may feel the need to wash your hands or just take an outright shower after you hear me say that, but I think deep down you always knew that was true. So here's the challenge, and this is what I'm pleading with you guys to be a part of. Respect the people who have the best interest of the players at heart. Respect people who have the best interest of the game at heart. Mute at every turn the bad actors on both sides of the room that are here not for the love of this sport or the love of college athletics or the love of those players getting to live out their dreams and fulfill their dreams, but instead the ones that are just here to enrich themselves, because those are bad actors. Don't need them in the room. And no matter what happens here, no matter how much money players are making, no matter how many rights they have, you're going to have a chorus out there that sings the tune of, it's not enough, it's not enough. And really a lot of them don't believe that. A lot of them just believe there's more money in this to be squeezed out into my pocket if I paint the illusion that it's not enough. I heard Greg Sankey talk today at SEC Media Days, or not Media Days, the spring meetings, and he was asked about like antitrust exemption and all this legal stuff that, again, you may or may not care about. And he said something that's true. He said, it's never been a better time. There's never been a better time to be a college football player. You'll probably never have more freedom, more rights, and more earnings potential than you have right now. That's why I notice I hardly ever hear players complain. I hardly ever hear them complain. I hear a lot of people complain on their behalf. And I've noticed that not just in college athletics, but in our general society. Anytime that there is a group of people who are shouting about the victimhood of another group of people, but the group of people themselves are barely vocal at all about it, sometimes there could be some bad actors in that equation, is all I'm saying. And I think that's the case here. Not all of them, because some of them are doing great and necessary and worthwhile work. I think it's pretty easy to spot the difference, by the way. So there's one more thing, a couple more things actually, that I think I notice here, and maybe it matters to you and maybe it doesn't. You know that I've taken you may know, if you don't, I'm going to tell you. I've taken a fair amount of heat about my feelings on what the state of the G5 should be and what the direction of the G5 should be. And my belief is it's insane for the G5 to want to continue competing in this world, because it makes no sense to me. I've shared my opinion on that. It's insane to me to pretend that 130 plus teams should be vying for the same championship. Just insane to me. There are many out there who disagree with that, because there are many out there who feel like the Boise State over Oklahoma example or the UCF over Auburn example. That's proof that anything could happen on any given Saturday or any given playoff field or whatever, and so they deserve a shot to decide it on the field. Have your opinion. I got 47 counterpoints to that. I don't have time tonight. Have your opinion. Here's all I'm going to say. At the crux of my argument is you have allowed the big boys to dictate your existence for a long time, including right here and now. You don't have a single part of your existence right now that you've decided for yourself. They've decided it, and then you've decided, all right, well, I guess we got to be a part of this. I look at the state of the G5, And I think to myself, it would be a much better world if they dictated their own terms and if they popped the illusionary bubble and created a legitimate bubble where you're in a room where you built the postseason format and you struck your media deals and you attracted your advertising partners and you develop a playoff with a carrot at the end of the stick that you actually have a half-decent shot of obtaining. Tulane could win that. Coastal Carolina could win that. They're never going to win the college football playoff as you know it. They know that. And yet they've allowed themselves to become convinced that, well, it's about the journey, man. Well, it's about having a shot. Well, you can't relegate us. You're already relegated. And my point here is, as wide as the gap is, as wide as it is right now, between the haves and the have-nots, you're as close as you'll ever be. Because what just got legalized is conferences like the SEC and the Big Ten, they get to take the media rights money that they're bringing in and legally, you hear that? Legally, they get to have $20+ million payrolls per year. So they get to attract the best talent in the world even more effectively than they ever have. And through the portal, they get to attract the few that they missed in the initial recruiting process more than they ever have. There will never be a wider disparity on the field than there will be in the future, in the next 5 years. There's never been a wider disparity in revenue than there will be in the next 5 years. And yet, out of some hard, dug-in, like ideological stance, you're still looking at this saying, no, we want to be a part of that. And anyone who doesn't want us to be a part of that, you're a G5 hater. I'm not, man. I'm not. I have told you before, and I'll tell you again, I don't care. It is true that we don't spend a lot of time talking about the G5 on this show. And the reason is not because I don't watch it. I watch a lot of it. The folks don't care about it. And I'm not running a charity here. We are very much for profit. We're not so clickbaitish, but I'm absolutely going to give folks what they continue to tell me through their viewership and listenership habits that they want. And they tell me they don't want me to talk a lot about the G5. So it doesn't matter to me either way. But off the air, I love the G5. I actually wish that we could create a world where they more sustainably exist in like a worthwhile, self-created environment instead of one that they just happen to be lumped into. And also, one of the things I agree with my G5 brethren on is when I make that argument, they say, well, Josh, you keep talking about how the G5 teams have no shot of winning a title and how they're not playing the same sport as the Bamas and Texases and Ohio States of the world. Well, Josh, neither is Wake Forest, neither is Vanderbilt. You're right about that. You're right. That's why if you left it up to me to restructure college football today and we made a legit Tier 1 and Tier 2, there'd be a ton of Power 4 teams that I'd relegate down to Tier 2, and there are a bunch of G5 teams I'd bring up to Tier 1. So make no mistake about that. This is not drawing a hard line based on the current sticker you have on your helmet. However, speaking of that notion, now that we're in this new world, does anything go? Is everything on the table? I thought that Iowa State Athletic Director Jamie Pollard the other day had a very interesting idea. And before you listen to this clip, I just want to make sure you understand there are a lot of you out there who feel comfortable right now because you think you're grandfathered in. You know, if you're a Big Ten member institution, you're set for life. If you're an SEC member institution, no matter how little you contribute to the overall quality of the conference, hey, we're set for life. Nothing could ever happen to us. Colin, take this little 15, 20-second piece of audio and roll it for me.
It's those that have all the gold make all the rules, right? So if I was a member of the Big Ten or the SEC, I'd start looking over my shoulder and wondering when's the day going to come when the top of the SEC is not going to want the bottom of the SEC.
Can that happen? Yeah, it can happen. You know why? Anything can happen because anything goes these days. So I picture somewhere out there, I'm not going to use a specific school, but I picture a fan of a specific, very underachieving Power 4 level school laughing. Whether they're listening to the replay or they're watching live, they're laughing and saying, ha, sucks to be the G5. Hey, friend, it could suck to be you in the not-too-distant future. They don't need you. In fact, if anything, you're dragging them down a little bit. You're dragging them down. So I don't think Jamie Pollard is just speaking there to hear himself talk. Now, I also don't think he has knowledge that anything is imminent, but he made some good points there. So, yes, college football has a brave new world, and we're all living in it. Those are my thoughts on the situation. I will be very excited to read the comments here. The only thing I ask before you comment, especially on this particular matter, is listen to what I actually said. That's because I don't take a lot of time to respond to the people that miscontextualize what I said. It happens on Twitter a lot, but it also happens in our comment section a lot. I love going back and forth with you guys. Just accurately represent what I say. If you disagree with it, no problem with it. No problem. I have some of the most fun I have in our comment section going back and forth with people who just see it differently than I do. But make sure you at least hear what I said before that.